Hi, and welcome to the Unhinged History Podcast, the podcast where two friends read history memes, learn the history behind it, and then share the history we've only recently learned and made our families sick of learning alongside us. I'm host number one. I am Theresa.
I'm host number two, and I'm Angie.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah, we're here with a whole bunch of weird things that you may or may not know about. And if you do know about and we forgot something incredible, let us know because like I admitted to earlier, we only recently started learning these things.
That's true, but we've done stories that we've both been sitting on the knowledge of for years.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
But I think what, at least in my opinion, what I think you need to say is while in the middle of researching one story, we learn something else and decide we must share that instead.
Yes, yes. I was coming
hmm
to serve up some realness about a story that I knew and was going to go off into a different tangent, I thought. And then I got sidetracked completely.
These are things.
But I think I went first last time. So I think it's your turn
Oh, well then let me get my
because
notes.
last time was 72 and I did Christine Jorgensen,
Oh,
the
that's right.
the GI who made history with, becoming a world-renowned woman just for being herself and stepping into an identity that she'd long suspected. And then you said the story of Sally Stanford, which in hindsight, I
That's
realized
right.
I misunderstood who Sally Stanford was and thought this was going to be one of like the wife of the namesake of Stanford College. Um,
Oh.
And that story is wild unto itself. And I was like, oh, buckle up. We are ready. We are in for it. And then you told me another
I
very
threw something totally
incredible
different
story.
at you.
And I regret nothing. This was amazing. This is fantastic.
As
But
we should.
yes,
There we go. Okay, so where are my notes at here?
I don't know. That
Oh,
wasn't
I
my
found
turn to
him.
keep
I was
track of
just,
them.
I know, okay, I have like 37 tabs open and I need to go through and close a bunch of them, but I'm scared.
I only close
Um,
the ones that play music. Those cannot be trusted.
commercials need to stop. We don't know what we're trying to watch. Um, so my story actually comes from, it was supposed to be something entirely different until I started looking into it and realized there's a way bigger story that's just as entertaining. So that's what we're working with. And believe it or not, I only have like six sources. That's like a rarity for me to have not 627.
Right.
Um so I'm gonna give you the history of coffee. How familiar with the history of coffee are you?
Uh, Pretty stinking good. I
Okay, so
expect me to chime in when we get to Ethiopian goat herders.
yeah, fine. Then you can just start off the story. Let me tell you my sources first. Um, so Britannica.com, the history of coffee, origin, facts, and timeline. Tastingtable.com has 10 times coffee was banned around the world, which is literally the funniest thing in the world to me. A New York Times article called Uncommon Grounds. Britannica again for Gustav III of Sweden. And then a National Library of Museum assessment on Gustav III's absolute hatred for coffee. So I'll let you tell the origin story then with your Ethiopian goat herder,
I
if
mean,
you so
okay.
wish, or I can.
So I'll
Your choice.
I'll go from off the cuff, didn't prepare for this, and you tell me what I missed, at least from the original mythos, right? So from what I know, there was a goat herder in Ethiopia, and he's just doing his thing, getting these goats and getting them fed, moving them through. And he recognizes when they start to eat off of this one tree that they become a bit hyper, a bit chaotic, a little bit crazy. And this tree has these cute red berries, these called cherries now.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up taking them. I think he eats them himself because the berries themselves are sweet and delicious. And then he also gets a little energetic. He's feeling great. He's, not got the Ritalin high going, but he's at least got some, stimulants in his system. And it's
Yep.
somehow, in some way, they go through this bizarre thing where they experiment with cooking the beans.
Yeah, that's it. You nailed it. Yeah.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Well done. In case you're curious, that was roughly around 850.
So it's been a minute.
It's been a minute, yeah. You nailed that was exactly the story I was gonna tell. This is what we know of to be the origin story. How true it is, no one can confirm, but we know it comes from Ethiopia. Um, and I think it's actually really fun. They actually referred to the leaves of the coffee plant as the beans and the leaves as bun. And
Okay.
initially they were simply chewed, but then Ethiopians figured out there was way better ways to get your caffeine fix than chewing the beans. So
Now, are
I thought
are
that
you
was
going
kind of
to get
interesting.
into the civet coffee?
No,
Okay.
I am not going to talk about that because I am more interested in, for my story's sake, why coffee's been banned so many times.
But you're also not a coffee drinker, right?
No, I actually, for the fun of this, considered getting a mocha, but I'm actually drinking tea. So, a little
Okay.
fun fact about me, though, is straight out of high school, I did my stint in more than one coffee shop as a barista. So I know a lot about coffee. I just
But
don't
you
drink it.
don't
I'm like the
like
world's
it.
best barista. Yep. World's best barista. I don't want to drink the coffee. I just want to make it.
You're the equivalent of a nun teaching sex ed.
Kinda. Yeah, it would be fair to say that. Yeah. So at some point, perhaps as late as the 15th century, coffee plants make their way out of Ethiopia and across the Red Sea to southern Arabia, which we know today as Yemen. And in Yemen is where it begins its like human cultivation. Tradition says that Sufi monks were among the first to brew coffee as a beverage and used it to stimulate their prayer through the night. They called it kawa.
Hmm.
Okay, interesting. And
Sounds
that's where
pretty.
the world's love affair with coffee started. Or, so it would seem, because not too much later than that, different powers that be began banning coffee for you can, whatever reasons you can imagine. And also how quickly those bans never held or were immediately turned around. The first ban to note was in Mecca in 1511. That
Wow.
it's right. It's worth saying that not long after the Sufis started drinking the liquid hot gold, that coffee houses called Kevakanes started opening up. And what do you think happens at this point? Like you now have a coffee house. What happens in a coffee house?
People sit, talk, share ideas, and I'm assuming the wrong ideas are shared.
There you go. Men gonna men, and they begin meeting and talking while drinking the beverage. These talks often lead to talks of politics and religion and philosophy and other ideas like that. And additionally, not only are they meeting and having these conversations, but these conversations are happening longer and in bigger chunks of time than they would have any other time because coffee is allowing them to stay stimulated, which is a really interesting point.
Yeah.
So you can imagine this doesn't go real well for the governor of Mecca, a man called Kara Beg, and in 1511, Beg closes all the coffee houses and imposes a severe physical punishment on anyone caught selling or drinking the coffee.
Wow.
This doesn't last long, like not even a year, because basically the Sultan of Cairo, oh, Lord help me say his name, Al
Wait.
Ashraf Kusan, I'll get there.
Okay.
Usa al-Jurari, who he's a huge fan of the drink, and at the time, Cairo rules over Mecca.
Oh, yeah,
So,
that's
yeah,
going over like a fart in church.
right. So the Sultan overturns the ban. Like the minute he hears about it, he is like, absolutely not. Like, this is the nectar of the gods. I will
Yeah.
not be. Mm-mm, no.
It starts out with, I'm sorry, you did what now? How
Yeah,
quickly can
exactly.
that
One
paper be
eyebrow
thrown in
up
the fire?
in the bin. Yep, right.
Yep.
So 1511. Now, mind you, that first ban was 1511. 1510, Karabeg is found guilty of embezzlement and put to death. So the moral of the story here is like, don't take the Sultan's morning Joe. He's gonna have a problem with that.
You said his
Years go
last name
by.
is Beg, B-E-G, right?
Yep.
I would be curious if he's related to Janny Beg.
Oh,
Janny Beg, who leader of the Golden Hordes, who may or may not have flung the bodies whole or in pieces over the walls of Kappa.
over the wall. It's what year was that?
That was 1620 something.
I
So
wouldn't be.
maybe an ancestor, because
Yeah, because this is 50. That was 1511. So
yeah,
we're about 120 years. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm honest, because as we have discovered with all of our other stories,
it's all related,
everybody,
Yeah.
yeah,
You get a couple key players that just really know how to stay in the narrative.
they really do. Yep, they really do. So we were gonna fast forward a few years. We also are in Mecca again, but the year is now 1535. It's another attempt to ban the drink. This time it wasn't about politics, it was about religion. Coffee
Mm,
houses originally began as places with like I said, they were talking about religion and politics and philosophy. And so a lot of these coffee houses, especially for the Sufi and other people of religion, they were meeting and discussing their religion, and that was it.
right.
But, things change over time, right? And eventually religion isn't the only thing they're talked about. So this doesn't go over well with the Muslim clerics. So they find a workaround and they basically say that Islamic law, being the rule of the land, they cite chapter 5 of the Quran, verse 90, that forbids the drinking of intoxicants.
Okay. So they're coming at it through the
So,
same route the Mormons did.
right. So 1535, Mecca, some Muslims believe coffee is an intoxicant like alcohol, and so they ban it under religious law, but their efforts failed as all of this seemed like it more stemmed from a problem of translation of the actual word,
Okay.
which I think is really interesting. Like there are people that saw this as like actually that's not what coffee is. It's you're not being any less of a human, like it doesn't have the same effects on you as alcohol does.
Right.
So I think that's a really interesting that even then they were like, actually, hold up.
Yeah. Three
Probably because
mochas
they
and
just
I
really
don't
like
beat my
coffee.
dog.
Weird,
Yeah, like that's not, I've never had so much caffeine I've blacked out.
right? So long story short, their efforts fail. Coffee would soon step on the world stage and make its debut. We're going to fast forward just a little bit to 1536. We're going to hop on a plane. We're going to fly to Turkey because this is the Middle East.
Yep.
And Turkey is like really, really proud of its coffee. During this time, the Ottoman Empire pretty much rules over the Middle East, right? Like this is something we
Yep.
don't need to go back to the history books on. We're solid on this. And as such, it's called another name for it being the Turkish Empire. And the Turkish Empire was not willing to let the world forget where coffee really got its upstart in the world. And that's where we get the name Turkish coffee, which I think is kind of fun.
Right.
So in 1536, it becomes an import and it becomes, or excuse me, it becomes an important and incredibly profitable export throughout the Turkish Empire. So the beans, they're generally exported from the Yemeni port of Mocha.
Yep.
So make that connection, right? So they take their name from the region of the port. This trade route involved shipping the coffee to Suez and transporting it by camel to the Alexandrian warehouses, where it's picked up by French and Venetian merchants.
And is it
So,
at this point that when it gets to Italy, aren't the beans um somebody decides, and you can tell me who, heats the beans to actually prevent them from sprouting so that I think it's the Turks do this so that nobody
yes.
can start their own coffee
Mm-hmm.
orchards, groves.
Yeah, so they put in a ton of precaution to make sure that the quote unquote secrets of coffee stayed just that. They only want to make sure the beans get out, so they figure out how to fire roast them, and that way the plant itself can't be cultivated anywhere else.
Which is
However,
smart. I mean, I get it.
right, and I mean it's huge for them. It's such a massive source of their income that it's super important to them for a plethora of reasons why they would keep it a secret. However, despite their jealous guardian of their monopoly, they didn't entirely keep it out of the world's way. So, like you said, no fertile berries are allowed to leave the country unless they've first been put in boiling water or partially roasted to prevent the
Hmm.
germination. But sometime during the 1600s, a Muslim pilgrim named Baba Budan smuggled 7 seeds out, supposedly by taping them to his stomach.
I love this. I love this.
Right?
Smugglers are going to
And
smuggle.
right, I laughed so hard. I was like, "Hold on, that's coffee. Why are we smuggling coffee?" But then I
I
realized it's a
mean,
very different world today.
and it's also like you think about like the spice trade and all of the things that spice traders did, like the countries of origin for the spices, they created these elaborate stories on the cinnamon sticks only are harvested from the nests of these extremely predatory birds. And you're like, what?
What? Yeah, I mean, just add that to the list of weird stuff that people have done and or said to protect their monopoly of income. He is, however, able to get the seeds out and cultivate them in southern India in the mountains of Mysore. So by this point, it's the 1600s, it's 1660, the Dutch dominate the world's shipping trade. And they managed to transport a tree to Holland from Aden. So now we have trees, right?
Yeah, but Holland is not exactly the warm tropical area that coffee needs. Like you can grow coffee
Right.
in Portland, but it's going to be some sad looking trees.
It's not going to probably be the best tasting either, if we're going to be honest, right?
No, it won't be.
Right. So, right around this time, now the Dutch obviously have kind of a run on their ability to trade and move supplies around the world. They begin growing coffee in Ceylon in
And where?
1658. Ceylon,
Where's
I
that?
believe I believe that's on the Asian side.
Okay.
I am not 100% certain, so now that you're asking me that, that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure I knew, and I don't. So let me just confirm for you. Sri Lanka.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Okay. So they figured out how to do this. They're in Sri Lanka. It's 1658. They're growing stuff. They're super excited. In 1699, another Dutchman transplants trees from Malabar to Java, following the cultivation in Sumatra, Celebes, Timor, Bali, and other islands in the East Indies, which is right
Yep.
now where we know, right? Okay, so this is the point at which the production of the Dutch East Indies determines the price of coffee in the world market. And as I noted earlier, I thought this was a really fun fact. During the 1700s, both Java and Mocha, respectively, they are named for their port and they become the most famous and sought after coffees, which are the words that we still know and use today, which I think are really fun.
Yep. And I will say,
Um,
we haven't gotten to the African coffees yet, but now that we've said Sumatra, I love Sumatran coffee, but I have to be in the right mood for it. And I'd want it ground for my French press and on my Chemex because Sumatran coffees have this beautiful, it's going to sound like the most bizarre sentence you've ever heard because you don't like coffee. They they have a beautiful paper bag taste. Like very earthy, very, like you can't
I'm
relate. You're like, I've never thought, what I just need? I just need a good mouthful of brown paper bag.
I'm gonna go lick the inside of my lunch bag.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's delicious and it's a very different taste from an Ethiopian coffee.
Well, I'm really glad you said Ethiopian because Sumatra's not in Africa.
No, I know Sumatra is in, yeah, but coffees from different regions taste very differently, right? Like you have Sumatra coffee,
Absolutely.
very heavy, very earthy, and that's going to taste very different from an African coffee. Ethiopia being in Africa, Ethiopian coffees being delicious, more berry-like, more tea-like. And then when you go over to Latin America, which we'll get to eventually with because we're talking the history of coffee, those coffees are going to have more of a cinnamony, more, like it's going to be different.
If I had to pick, I would pick a South American coffee.
Okay.
That's just me, but I don't like the inside of paper bags either.
I mean, look, I love books. I love books so much that sometimes I just need to have a mouthful.
I'm here for it. Um, have to find myself. Oh, okay. So with that being said, with Kaffa, with Java and Mocha being named for their port, it is interesting to note now that not a ton of high quality currently comes from either Java or Mocha,
Hmm.
and mostly because Mocha ceased operations as a viable port in 1869 when the Suez Canal was completed. And when I read that, I was like, what? Like my brain couldn't. I think in my brain I was thinking the Suez was the Panama, and either that or I just really did not understand my years at all, and I was so confused for like a split second, and then went, "Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I got it. That makes more sense."
Yep.
All that to say, Europeans didn't initially really know what to think of coffee, but it wouldn't take long for it to become a fan favorite. Eventually, they would come around, and it would be an obsession, so much so that Pope Clement VII supposedly tasted the drink because his priests wanted him to ban it, and his response was, quote, "Why? This Satan's drink is so delicious." He goes on to say, "That would be a pity to let the infidels have exclusive use of it. We shall fool Satan by baptizing it and making it a truly Christian beverage."
Ah, the Catholic Church, we're going to add this to the list of things that I approve that the Catholic Church has given us. Saint Olga Kiev, bringing coffee
Baptized
and,
coffee.
like, look, add this to their successes.
Truly, I mean, it makes me wonder if there's a secret coffee house in the Vatican.
Oh, I'm willing to bet. Like, I mean, come on.
Hmm. What you got? What you got in those archives? You got archived coffee beans?
I am willing to bet that they have some incredibly well-tuned La Mazzocca espresso machines that are finely tuned and kept well maintained with only the
I would have
best
to agree with
beans.
you. I would have to agree with you. What we're uncovering here is a conspiracy theory to find the world's best baristas. Um, by the 1650s, coffee was sold on Italian streets by lemonade vendors who sold coffee, chocolate, and liquor.
Honestly, where's my ice cream truck made for adults that has this offering?
Truly, right?
Just run it
It
morning,
is
noon, and night. Let me choose
called,
when I
yeah,
need to switch
margaritas
over.
at dinner. Yeah, like we can do this. It's fine. You don't know how my day's been. You don't know where I started.
Yeah, I work East
Yeah,
Coast hours. Don't judge.
exactly. Yeah, just put the margarita in there. I'll take the coffee too. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It is fun to note the first coffee house actually opened in Venice in 1683, which I was like, dang, okay. However, at this point, with which I know I could go on and on and on, and you could definitely go on and on and on and add more fun stories about coffee and the travels. However, the reason I shared this background is because I really want to tell you about King Gustav III of Sweden.
Go on.
Okay, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. of King Gustav. So it's the late 1700s. Gustav is now the king of Sweden. He comes to the throne in 1771. He's intelligent, he's super cultured, and he's a big fan of the Enlightenment. Great. But the problem is his throne and power are pretty shaky at the moment because he needs to get the parliament, or what they call the Riksdag, in line and on board with him. You remember my Tordenskjold story, the gentleman that
Yes,
stopped the sea battle that asked for more
yep,
armor?
yep.
Yeah. Okay. So do you remember that around this time, Sweden and Denmark and Norway and pretty much the whole of the North was embroiled in some sort of battle in some sort of war, and they had been for like a few hundred years.
No, but go on.
Yeah, so okay, so this is a thing. So this is the world with which Gustav is coming to power. People have been at war forever in one way or another, in one skirmish or another, and the central power of Sweden has been weakened. So
Okay.
he sets out to regain control and centralize the power, take make Parliament happy, but take authority from Parliament. So he's trying to play the middle diplomat here. 1772, he gains control and establishes a new constitution. He outlaws torture as a method of investigating crimes, which I was like, cool, good on you.
Yep.
He expands religious freedoms and toleration of religion and the freedom of press. Free trade is promoted. Their economy is made even better through his various reforms. He loves the arts, writing plays, watching plays, and he establishes a school which championed national literature.
Is there a
Hey,
big butt coming? Because I feel like we've really established some amazing things.
right. Um, Side note, which is kind of unrelated to my story, but I thought was interesting to share about him. By 1791, he aimed to form what we would see like as a UN, but basically a league of European monarchs with whose whole goal is to oppose the development of the French Revolution. Keep that in your noodle noggin for later.
Okay.
So, despite all of his great sides, he does come into the world, he does come into power in a really shaky situation. He is never going to make anybody 100% happy, just given the climate of the time,
Yeah, I mean that's watch
right?
Prince repeat for any human. You can't be everyone's cup of tea.
Right. So just hold on to that. One of his inevitable failings is that he absolutely hates coffee. He detests coffee.
Uh,
He wants to make coffee go away. So he conducts an experiment to prove how terrible it is. In fact, he begins what could be considered Sweden's first ever clinical study.
okay.
Okay. It's a twin study. Unfortunately, I could not find any sources that actually gave the names and like the life information of the twins with which he studied on, but they were both convicted felons, probably both murderers, 100% sure at least one of them was. And this is what he decides. Their sentence is going to be death by coffee. Here's the plan. Both are able to live out their lives as life imprisonment for as long as they possibly can. One would be given exclusively coffee, and the other tea.
No
His
food.
whole goal, oh, they're gonna be well cared for, but as far as drinking goes,
Okay.
coffee and tea. I'm sure water is in there, but his whole goal is to prove that coffee is the worst. It's terrible for your health. It's terrible for your mental well-being. It's just awful. He is under the impression that this coffee drinker will die immediately. Like, that's his hope anyway, that he won't last long. But here's the kicker, and the whole reason I wanted to share this story in the first place. Two, this is a quote from the National Library of Medicine. Two prominent physicians were monitoring their health. Both physicians die before the experiment is completed, one dying right before the other. Gustav III himself, who was not great at politicking, was assassinated in
Hmm.
1792 by Captain Jacob Ackerstorm, who was led by a group of disgruntled aristocrats. While both twin brothers outlived them for a healthy long time, eventually the tea-consuming twin brother died at 83 years old. The coffee-drinking brother died sometime later. The ban on coffee was lifted in Sweden in the 1820s. In the
And
end,
now they have
Sweden,
ficas. Do
they
you
have
know?
all kinds of things.
Well, but do you know what fika is? It's a word to
No,
describe like a coffee date. Like we have to use the word coffee dates. They say fika. They
fika.
just have a
Yeah,
word for it.
now they have a con. They should. Everybody should have a word for a specific thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Sweden becomes one of the top drinking coffee countries in the world. And all because this one guy just really hated coffee that
Suck it,
much.
Gustav.
I love that. Um, I do want to say I think this is really interesting. And for those of you new to the podcast, I have a teenage son who pretends to really hate history, but he knew way more about this subject than any one teenager should. When I told him that this was what my topic was, and I had mentioned that powers that be were always disinclined to allow people to meet in coffee shops because it could spark controversy, it could spark revolution, it could spark philosophical changes, whatever. He pointed out that that's a fact, and the Enlightenment created a lot of those things, and that both the French Revolution and the freedom of America came from sitting in a coffee shop.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, I love you. Thank you so much. If you're curious to know, beer and coffee cohabitated for a time in Boston's Green Dragon, a coffee house slash tavern from 1697 to 1832. And here is where many cups of coffee and other types of brews were drank while John Adams, James Otis, and Paul Revere met to format rebellion. And it could be
Wow.
called one of the headquarters of the American Revolution. So they weren't wrong.
Wow.
That's
I
that's
love that.
that's my story.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a story for you that um, I heard a line in passing and was attempting to pull like timeline notes and kind of like talk through, you know, I was setting up like the scene, right? I was like, okay, here's the chain of events and here's one of the chains. And I was going through and as I was like, okay, this was the fallout of this was the fallout of this. And the fallout line of this one was so, I'm sorry, what? That I had to stop and dive in and then change my entire thoughts. I'm going to tell you the story of the Black Nite Brawl in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is
Hmm.
sometimes called the Black Nite Brawl. It is sometimes called the Black Nite Uprising. The Black Nite Uprising is going to be a better use of that word, but you might need to look at both. Neither of which I
So,
really came through like and found other existing podcasts about this. So there's good articles if you know where to look. We're the first ones to at least put this out.
so what I'm hearing is my history of coffee was a great lead-in.
I mean, because from from mixed coffee bar to official bar. Well, actually, I didn't tell you that. Yeah, we are in a bar. Okay, my sources: Milwaukee County
You said
Historical
Milwaukee.
Society.
It's really hard to assume we're not in a bar.
Okay, fair. Um, so the Historical Society, Black Knight Brawl, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On Milwaukee, before Stonewall, the Black Knight Brawl stunned Milwaukee by Mikhail Tukak. WUWM 89.7, Milwaukee's NPR. Milwaukee's Black Knight Brawl took a stand for LGBT visibility 8 years before Stonewall by Audrey Nowakowski. WTMJ-4, Milwaukee. Milwaukee drag queen reflects on Black Knight Uprising as former tavern becomes first LGBTQ landmark in county by Sarah McGrew. NBC News, Milwaukee set up a designated site of 1961 LGBTQ uprising, a historical landmark by Joe Yorkaba. So, okay, obviously we're in
Hold on.
Milwaukee.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Hmm.
When you texted me earlier in the week and you
Uh-huh.
said I'm going to cover an event, did you mean Stonewall?
Yeah. I was
I'm so
going
excited.
I
Okay.
was going to do Stonewall and I got sidetracked.
I love this for me. Okay.
Hmm. Um, so obviously we're in Milwaukee, but the part of Milwaukee we're in these early 60s is described best as a lost and lonely part of town where the only new businesses popping up are ones that don't want to be found.
Okay.
So the streets are dark, they are not hospitable. We're in a building built in 1853 that was originally a grain elevator and an old flour mill at 400 North Plankinton Avenue and was later home of the manufacturers Fairbanks, Morse and Co. or and Co.
Hmm.
Long, known as the Old Mill Tavern and Cafe. Now, the ground floor of this was a storefront that was acquired by a local financier named Harry Kaminsky in 1958.
Financier.
I know, it sounds really fancy. Um, Now, he's unable to get a tavern license under his name for whatever reason, but he's able to convince somebody named Mary Walthen of Omaha, Nebraska to open Mary's Tavern. And she
Okay.
immediately complains that she's being bothered by homosexual clientele by nearby taverns.
Okay.
And she says that they drive the regular customers away. And when she tells Kaminsky this, his response is, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And so Kaminsky, he's kind of onto something. So it's after World War II, and he believes that savvy sponsors can quickly figure out a way to cater to this crowd that has nowhere else to go. So Mary's Tavern joins the Fox Bar, and the Fox Bar had opened in 48, so just a couple years prior. Um, and then joins Tony's Riviera that opened in 52. Um, Now, this was a longtime gay landmark that was earlier the Anchor Inn, and they create the city's first gay strip or gay bar strip. Now,
Okay.
Mary's mortified by this. I mean, she didn't appreciate them bothering her clientele, and now they're catering nearly exclusively to this clientele. So
Well, wait,
she,
wasn't she just the name, like the person that got the business license?
unclear. It seems like she at least was kind of managing some of it, right?
Okay.
Either way, not a big fan. So she sells her part to Kaminsky. She's like, just buy me out of the business and I'm done. So Kaminsky still can't have a bar under his name. So he recruits a guy named Wally Witham. And to take over the
That is
tavern
quite a
license,
name.
it is. And I appreciate the alliteration. And they changed the name of the bar to the Black Knight.
Okay. Like Knight?
Uh Nite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the shorter version, right?
S- So I'm not having an image of the fully armored
No,
plume
no,
and the
there's
helmet.
no
Okay.
there's no Batmobile in this story.
That wasn't what I was thinking, but now that you said it, there really is.
You're welcome. Now, it's not only like I remember when I covered Christine Jorgensen, how I had talked about how it was illegal to serve gays in bars.
Yes.
And Christine Jorgensen experienced a lot of oppression and calls to have her genitals checked before she could perform to ensure that she was atomically equipped to sing and dance.
So stupid.
Yeah, very much so. Um, but it's illegal to serve people in the LGBTQ community liquor in Wisconsin at this time, and it's illegal to allow them to congregate on bar premises. And if you violate these laws, bar owners can lose their licenses, and bar owner or bartenders can take a hit to their reputation.
Oh, okay.
Now, the Black
So
Knight
is it a
was,
book club?
I don't know exactly how they're going through and spinning this from a marketing perspective, to the community, but they're also in a very dark and lonely area, right? So I'm going
Okay.
to operate under the assumption that they just hoped everyone would ignore them.
Okay.
Now, the Black Knight wasn't just a
Don't we
tavern.
all?
We honestly, like, if you don't like it and it doesn't affect you,
Leave me alone.
right? It doesn't. So the Black Knight's different. It doesn't tolerate homosexuals. It's from the start a homosexual bar. It embraces them, it welcomes them. Lethem, he is a twice married man. He's got children. He becomes well known at creating a safe space for his customers. All sexual and gender expressions are welcome. And this is very rare in 61 in Milwaukee. Because you got to
Yeah,
remember,
okay.
we're in the Midwest.
Right.
Mhm. And
In
customers,
61.
yes, customers here find themselves extremely protective of their turf.
As they should.
Mhm. Now, the Black Knight's famous for being what it is. And it was said in one of the articles that I read, could have been the documentary I watched on it, that it wasn't a straight bar that allowed members of the Alphabet Mafia in. It was an LGBTQ bar that might allow straight people in.
Okay.
Like they just like, this is our place. And if we deem you cool enough to hang, that's the deal.
So they got invited to the cookout.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now it's August 5th, 1961. It's a hot and foggy August night, which is the worst combo because that just means wicked humidity. And on this
Muggy and
night,
gross.
mhm, four 20-year-old sailors go to this Milwaukee gay bar on a dare.
Okay.
Mhm. Now, despite being asked several times, they refuse to show any identification of the bouncer and they wind up being forcibly removed.
Okay.
If you're not going to play the rules to enter, then the cost of admission's too high.
Fair. Yeah.
And it's here that they end up being chased off by a bar patron in a bathrobe, wielding beer bottles in each hand.
I love that.
Hmm. Now, here is where I'm going to introduce the hero of this story. Quote, "We didn't start anything, but we sure as hell finished it," said Josie Carter, a gender non-conforming Black queen. Queen being the term she uses to describe herself.
Okay.
Okay. She is a contributor to Wisconsin's LGBT History Project in 2011. Quote, "These guys came down here to cause trouble, and when he tried to kick them out, they all tried to fight him. And I thought, oh no, you're not going to hurt my husband." And I went out there with a beer bottle in each hand, ready to knock some heads.
Okay. Okay. Get it, queen.
Hmm. This man turned on me, and I thought, I can't let him put my hands on me. He was big, and he kept coming at me. I thought he'd kill me. In that moment, I could fight off an army in a bathrobe. I let him have everything that was in that bottle. He went down.
Get it.
And this is when the servicemen flee the bar and they take their injured friend to county emergency hospital and they go back to Kane Place Tavern. They wind up about a dozen men and decide to go downtown and, quote, clean up the Black Knight, unquote.
Mm. You know what Dorothy Swan would say to this? You is no gentleman.
You is no gentleman is right. And it's later that night that they do come back and they've got anywhere from 10 to 15 friends. Now, these sailors don't understand who they're dealing with.
Clearly.
And this is when local historian Mikhail Takek says that they swung the door to the Black Knight open and yelled something. And it was kind of a record scratch moment. And the bar goes silent. And all 75 patrons turn their heads and look at the door. Now, Josie Carter had already given their friend a concussion. They'd threatened her, her partner, and her bar. And before she'd even had time to finish putting on her makeup for the night. So this is Saturday night. The customers have rolled in and she's wound up the Black Nite crowd. She's told them the full story and she's been encouraging them to stay and defend the bar if the sailors do, in fact, come back like they threatened.
Okay.
Now, Wally, the bartender, he says, okay, guys, you have to get out of here because only God knows what's about to happen. But we didn't run from the fight. We didn't run from nothing, Josie said. And as you know it, these big ass mothers came in and just tore that bar apart and looking for little old me and my husband because their buddy got beat up. And it was only a year before that the police have a raid in Juneau Park, and that results in Elroy Schultz, a gay brewery worker, being beaten to death. It's during
Hmm.
this time that gay men are harassed in a string of operations everywhere they go. They're being disowned, they're being demoralized and disrespected. And now there's this violence at their doorstep. And just because I gotta say it again, we do not run from a fight, Josie told the crowd. We do not run from anything. And it was on August 5th, 1961, that Milwaukee learned just how true that was because the sailors returned and they weren't just fighting Josie and the bouncer anymore. They were fighting an army of angry queens, lesbians, and gay men who had just reached their breaking point and they have nothing left to lose.
That is literally like that is the biggest mistake on those sailors' part.
Yeah, they've been playing a fun round of F around and they're about to find out.
Hmm. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Wally Witham later reports that, quote, the gang came in and started tearing the bar apart, and the bar fought back. Earlier that night, the servicemen had found a nearly empty bar and a 4-to-1 fight against the bouncer. And this time, they found a bar packed with 75 patrons ready and willing to defend their turf by any means necessary. Now, the battle doesn't last long, but it is intense. One patron suffered extreme lacerations when he was thrown through a broken window, and another patron experienced a brain concussion when he's hit in the head with a bar stool. He would remain in critical condition for weeks after the brawl, but in the end, over $2,000 in losses were reported, including the bar's entire liquor inventory, an electric organ, a jukebox, and all of the windows.
That's insane because you know good and well that today, if that same thing would have happened, it would have been over $1 million.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But we're also in a very rundown part of town. We're not in like
And
this
it's
was,
1961.
you know what I mean? Like there's a difference between a dive bar and a very schwanky establishment that also serves drinks. And so I have a feeling this is more of the latter.
Hmm.
You know what I
I
mean?
gotcha.
Okay. So good quote here. One of the guys came at me and said, I'm going to say some words. I'm not going to bleep them out. This is the
Okay.
language of the time. This is a quote. Okay, you sick faggot cop, come on. And I popped him right there and blood sprayed and he fell to the ground. I'll never forget that as long as I live. He started it, but I stopped it. I may be a faggot, but I'm the one who stopped it. And then the cops came down and put them all in the paddy wagon and took them all to jail, says Josie Carter. They said you have no business coming down here and harassing these people. The police were good to me back then. They took care of me and taught me how to stay out of trouble. I never had no problem with the police as long as I didn't make problems.
Don't play stupid games, don't win stupid prizes.
Now, to Keck, the local historian, he says the Black Knight was able to openly cater to queer people because the owner paid the police for protection.
Okay.
Like,
Wouldn't be the first time that protection money has been paid.
right? And considering the outcome, I don't have any complaints about this.
Yeah.
I hate that they're paid to care, but if they care, okay.
It sounds like maybe they actually did care with the fact that Josie said they taught me how to keep out of trouble.
Yeah. Now, 3 people are hospitalized, one serviceman and then two of the bar patrons that I talked about. And the next day, the police charged three of the servicemen with disorderly conduct and searched for about a dozen others who they said, quote, joined in the invasion of the bar. And this is especially interesting that Josie, the self-described queen, she doesn't consider herself transgender despite living a very full and proud female life. And she, like at this time, there's laws that have prohibited cross-dressing, and they've been on the books since pioneer times. There was a law that was like you had to wear three pieces of clothing that matched your gender.
Okay.
And like socks don't count, like so you had to like she could have been arrested at any point for all of this, but she just lives her life very herself, and she's very humble and very modest, and she just everything I've read about her was absolutely incredible. And so when we hear this story, it's very awe-inspiring because the police, they were empowered to apprehend and arrest and inspect, and the inspect part is disgusting to me, any individual that didn't have those three pieces of gender appropriate clothing. And I can't imagine
Hate that.
how brave and bold and proud of herself and her identity that she had to be in the the Midwest. Like I just don't understand that. Like there was a certain level of I know who I am and self-assuredness that
Mm-hmm.
I think we could all
Confidence.
benefit from having within ourselves. Now, this brawl and if it's referred to as a brawl, then you just think of it as a bar fight. But when it's referred to by coverage as an uprising, it shows the empowering nature of the script switching, of people being
Mm-hmm.
referred to as, limp-wristed or just pansies or not real men or not real, people you could walk on and walk all over. When it's referred to as an uprising, you hear we're done. We're not going to take it. We have a right to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this uprising is the first in Wisconsin history among the
Oh wow.
LGBTQ plus community. And local coverage, they it seeks to scandalize this whole event. And the news stories change as history progresses. So for the first time, Milwaukee knew that gay people existed here, and then in large enough numbers that they've got their own spaces, they have their own businesses that they are supporting and, founding, and that they're going to fight back. And this is incredible because on the majority of them are isolated and alone, but now they understand that there is a community and that they had felt this lifetime of shame and guilt, rejection, and now they're like, hey, I've got brothers and sisters out here. And that all this is happening and being uncovered and unraveling as Waltham and his patrons are cleaning up the carnage. And, we know that the servicemen were charged, but I'm going to call out his name. Unfortunately, Judge Christ T. Seraphim dismisses their charges to quote a lack of evidence.
The 75 people standing in the room weren't witness enough.
Apparently. And the fact that we have the bouncer and Josie Carter who were there at the beginning of the incident and then
Mm-hmm.
sees them return. Like, I feel like there's enough evidence to substantiate all of this because I'm sure that they probably weren't quite at the hospital when they took their buddy for the concussion. So I have a feeling we have a couple more witnesses at the hospital. And then at the
I
second
would
bar
have
where
to
they
think
go and
so.
recruit the friends.
Yeah.
Like,
Sounds
so
like the judge really didn't do his homework on that one.
yeah, he found it in for sure. And that's why I have no problem calling him out. Like I actually included the names of the servicemen, but and if you had questions,
Yeah.
because I didn't look up what they did with the rest of their lives, but
I don't really care.
no, the real story is in the people who stood up. So the bar ends up being ordered to close. More politically, it's not necessarily ordered to close. The Common Council urges with them to change the name of the business. And if he does that, he can keep the liquor license. So the bar operated as Bourbon Beat until it was raised for St. Paul's St. Paul Avenue's extension in 1966. And within a few years, the entire block, the entire strip of gay bars is deliberately demolished. But it's important to note that the seed had been planted within the earliest gay rights activists of the community. And by 62, the Milwaukee Journal is reporting, quote, the homosexual has gotten bolder. And then by 69, there's 36 gay bars that open in Milwaukee, which allow men to dance together, which was something forbidden in the Midwest.
That's insane.
And that was something that made Stonewall so important, is it was just a place for them to dance together. Like they didn't want to hook up per se. They wanted the opportunity to find love like we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll take the means that are given, but they also want to live a life, a full life.
As most people do, I would think.
Yeah. Now, throughout the entirety of her life, Josie downplays the event as just another wild night out. She refuses to accept the title Mother of Gay Milwaukee, even though the whole generation coming up underneath her of, transgender youth, they refer to her as the adopted transcestor, which I found adorable. I love a good pun, and that one was beautiful. She dies at age 73. Now,
What
no,
year?
2014.
Oh, okay.
So fairly recently, all things considered. Now, November 14th, 2022, the Black Nite Uprising is now officially considered a historical landmark in Milwaukee, and there's plans for a monument that are underway at the Black Nite site. I went through and did a Google Maps, like to look at the actual street view, because like that was almost 2 years ago, right? And it's not, nothing is there. There's nothing there yet. But the Milwaukee County Historical Society, they're the ones that actually seek to get that marker in place. And their hope, well, it would be the city's first historical marker that honors an LGBTQ person because they really attribute Josie Carter to the entire thing. And to be fair, she did show up in a bathrobe. I mean,
Listen,
so
anybody with enough cojones to show up in a bathrobe with two beer bottles is a win in my book.
I mean, because at that point it was literally sit down and shut up or come as you are. And she came as she was. The whole story still seeks to provide inspiration and hope to LGBTQ people that are facing, our adversity and abuse, especially when we think of, trans women of color, because she is Black. And she is such a powerful woman and she's so humble. And I've got photos of her.
Oh, I'm so glad you. I was so hoping you did.
Let me share this.
Look at that hair. I would love to do a great job of describing this, but all I can say is it's the 60s. Yeah.
She is,
This by this picture she might be in the early 70s if you look at the material of her gown.
yeah, she's reclined back. She has her legs, uh, I'll say crossed, like her at her ankles.
Yeah,
She's
crossed at her
wearing
ankles, yeah.
a red satin robe with a very um thick collared necklace.
Brooch. Oh,
Yeah,
it's
well, she's got a
gorgeous.
brooch
She
that
is
holds the,
bedecked.
yeah, like that could be her outfit for the night, or it could be that is just what she wears before
Her
she puts
dressing
on her
gown.
her gown. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she just has an aura, a glamour.
She absolutely does. She's got the massive big hair and I mean she is dripping in jewels that are
Oh yeah.
just stunning, gorgeous. Her makeup is beautiful and it's definitely Halloween time because the pictures on the wall scream 70s Halloween
Oh
cost
yeah, yeah. That's probably
decorations.
a jack-o'-lantern paper
That's what
tacked
I'm
on
thinking,
thing, and
yeah.
then you got the black cats right there. Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
then here's another picture of Josie and another patron. I don't know. I didn't record her name. Um,
Okay, so they're drinking champagne. They're having a ball. Josie has the fastener hat on.
mhm, mhm.
Her hair is again stunning. Is she wearing peacock feathers around her neck
There
as
is
a
some
choker?
sort of feather accoutrement. I don't know exactly what it is, but either way, it is
It's
darling.
beautiful.
She's pulling it off. She's working it.
Mm-hmm. She
And
is. They
then
look so happy.
this is just a picture from just a party at the Black Knight of these two fantastic drag queens that one is working an evening gown in black and white with gloves that go up to her elbow, and she has got the best makeup going. And
And
then
the
there,
biggest tutu frock back half of that gown is
oh,
just,
it
yeah.
is it is amazing. Like the entire thing is like this was the party to be at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other one looks like a Harlequin.
Yeah, I
The
didn't know how to really describe the second outfit, and so I was going to just skip because I didn't quite have words for like there's a lot happening. There's some leopard
There's
or
so much
Dalmatian print
happening.
tights. There's pearls that are being strung up as a belt, sort of kind of. There's ostrich pink ostrich feathers coming out of the back, maybe of like
I
a
think,
showgirl
yeah,
outfit, and then the same
that's
plumage
what I'm
in the
thinking.
headdress. Either way,
Yep.
it
And I
beat
love that the photo's dated February 61.
yes.
Oh my gosh, how fun. They look like they're having a blast.
Oh, completely. But just
The
like
individual in the back with the mask on,
oh, 10 stars. I'll
they
be
this
taking no questions.
yeah, 10 out of 10. Where did you get your plumage?
Agreed, agreed. And you talk about eyebrows, and eyebrows are on point.
Literally.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
I'm here for it. Yeah. I want to go
But
to their Halloween party now that I'm looking at it.
right? No, they clearly had a great time. And I loved every minute of this. And one of the things that really kind of hit me was that there are, and it makes sense, right? Like everything I'm about to say is just one of those duh moments, but it was news to me was that as like the local historian, Mikhail Tuckett was talking about this whole situation and, talks about, sharing and, you know, telling the story of the Black Nite Uprising, that they're watching new generations of members of the LGBTQ community come in and be accepted and to take this mantle and to, live into their lives because this event happened. And they're able to, provide a safe space because they had a safe space for them.
That's cool. I would love to know about the person with the black leggings and the high heels. I want to see the rest of their outfit.
Mm, because they are reclined out on a bar stool. There's a long neck
Looking
bottle in their hand,
fabulous.
or maybe a bottle of champagne.
I'm thinking a bottle of champagne because these people are classy.
You know what? You're right. You're right. I'm just imagining
Thank you.
Josie Carter coming out with two beer bottles in either hand in her robe, and I'm just like, "Ugh."
I am now
It's
picturing her in that pink robe with the brooch and a beer bottle
oh,
in each hand.
right. And it is something special when you think of these men suffering from toxic masculinity to go to some place on a dare because they want to exert that bizarre, s- like caricature of masculinity, and then to get handled by a woman in a bathrobe.
Live
Like,
your life.
you know what? They deserve it. They deserve every inch of that aching ego.
They really do. In yeah, I'll never understand. I say this a lot, but usually just to the husband, but I will never understand people just specifically being cruel to other people. Like, why? What do you gain
Yeah.
from that? Like, I don't understand. Like, I will never, ever understand that. And this is one of those times. What were you hoping to accomplish with that goal?
Hmm.
Yeah,
And I think that brings up a good point, right? Like, we don't understand, I say we, you and I, like, we don't understand the way why people would put somebody down when there's nothing to gain other than that. And we don't understand like how serial killers work. And I think it's because our brains aren't broken in that way. Like
I'll take it.
that doesn't make sense because we don't have those same breaks.
Yeah, I'm here for it. You're probably right.
I mean, because the second you look at something and you go, oh, I understand how that would happen, it's because there's things going on in your own psyche that lead you down that dark path. Whether or not you go down that dark path, if you understand it, then that's kind of a, ooh, I've got the recipe at my fingertips.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll never. We were talking this is such a sidebar, but we were talking about in relation, we're rewatching Game of Thrones.
Hmm.
And I'm still after all these years pissed that Caitlyn couldn't love Jon Snow. Like she was so mean to him just
Mm,
because she thought he was Ned's bastard. And it's like, that's a child. How could
yeah,
you knowingly look at that child and be mad? Like it's not his fault, even if you genuinely believed your husband, who is literally the epitome of honor,
yeah.
and assume he whatever. It just if I can't
Okay,
wrap
but
my brain around
pulling
it.
it pulling it back to historical context, like you look at Queen Liliuokalani, she adopts the child of her husband that he had. You know what I mean? Like he has an affair
That's
and she
yeah,
adopts that kid.
exactly. That makes sense to me. Like it's not the child doing that got this created this situation. So
Right.
the
You're hating the
appropriate thing
wrong
for
person.
right. And even still, like if she would have I don't know, it's just it bugs the crap out of me. And it
Hmm.
always will.
Like I get that not everybody wants to be a mom. Okay, fine. If you are willing and able, and well, if you want a kid, okay, great. You should be able
Mm-hmm.
to have kids. If you don't,
Mm-hmm.
don't. Because there's like, I was reading a book in defense of witches, and they made a great point. There are, three types of women. There's good moms, great aunties, and then there's women who shouldn't be allowed 50 feet around children.
That in.
Know who you are.
Mm-hmm. And run with it. When you figure it
Yeah,
out, yep.
own it. You want to be a mom, may you have as many kids as you want. You want to be a great
Mm-hmm.
aunt, may you have access to be a great aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And if you shouldn't
Provide
be
you with
around
all
children,
go away.
I cut you off though. Provide you with all.
No. Oh, I was just
Okay.
saying if you're going to be the great aunt, make sure, that she's provided with all the good wine and a great job so she can spoil the
Right.
kids and be the fun wine aunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, just saying. And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, but the same woman can be all three of those at some point in their life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to stay in one bucket.
Yep. Jump buckets.
Yeah. If you've enjoyed this tale, if you're like, oh my gosh, describing women's roles in regards to different buckets, this is just what I needed in my life. I bet you didn't know that, but here we are, serving it up.
Go to
You
Lowe's and tell your favorite bucket seller.
Yes. And on that note, goodbye.
Bye.